Hello, David. Thank
Hi.
you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk to you about the intersection between masonry and fire safety. So if you want to just start off by introducing yourself and explaining a little bit about your background.
Sure. So David Massaro. I've been in the fire service for about 30 years, the last 25. I spent working for the City of Schenectady, where I retired as assistant chief in July 31st.
Awesome. So maybe a loaded question, but how many fires do you think overall that you've helped to put out in your career?
That's a great question because I have no idea. 30 years, I figured thousands of calls, tens of thousands maybe, so probably in the hundreds for putting out fires, right?
In your experience, were you dealing mostly with residential fires, so homes that were catching on fire, or did you deal a lot with commercial spaces, so like manufacturing facilities, bigger places like that?
So I would say the vast majority of fires that firefighters will encounter are residential in nature, simply due to the codes associated with commercial buildings generally include like sprinklers or significant like fire safety systems. So we tend not to see a lot of fires within those commercial spaces, which isn't to say I haven't, but we have done fires in commercial spaces, just given unique circumstances associated with how the fire started or how it spread or the time of day. So I mean, they do occur, it's just not as often as residential.
How does your approach change as a firefighter? So say if you are entering a commercial space versus a home, are there differences in how you would approach?
Yeah, so residential traditionally is wood frame. So the tactics associated with fighting a fire in a wood frame residential, whether it's one family, two family, doesn't really matter. That differs very greatly from a commercial structure, which could be fire resistive or not combustible or heavy timber in the event of like the old mills and stuff. So the tactics are much different in terms of life safety. You tend to think there's more life safety in a residential building, specifically time of day associated. Commercial buildings can be wide open, so that affects ventilation and firefighting efforts and the amount of hose that you have to bring in. A lot of that, there's different properties. There's also traditionally like people aren't storing pool chemicals in their house, right? Where you could respond to a commercial property that's full of pool chemicals. So there's different ideas as far as tactics and operations and what we have to think about as we're coming up to that scene.
Talk to me about non-combustible versus combustible materials in buildings and what you've experienced with that.
Sure. So like non-combustible is stuff that's not really going to burn, right? So a lot of the stuff that you have in a residential building, so wood frame, wood burns, right? The coverings, whether it's vinyl or cedar or some kind of wood plank, all of that is combustible. So when you get into a non-combustible building, you're thinking like the big blocks, right? The whole building's made out of that, or maybe it's made out of brick, right? Stuff that isn't going to burn. It could spall based on exposure to fire, but it itself is not going to be. It's not going to add to the fuel load of a fire.
Sure. And just for viewers who might not know, what is spall?
Spall is where there's direct impingement of fire upon like a masonry, whether it's brick or block, and then over time that water evaporates out of the block as it's subjected to the fire, and then little pieces will start to crumble.
Okay. And can you speak at all to how long typically a masonry structure, say the heat and the flames, how long can that material kind of withstand that and still be structurally secure?
I'm not sure that there's a specific answer for that, only because it's, there's lots of variables. How old is the masonry? Is the grout in good shape? Is the block in good shape? Was it poured with rebar, in between the blocks to add to the stability? So I would imagine there may be a specific number I'm not aware of.
Sure.
I think there's so many variables. It would depend. It would also depend on how how quickly the fire department got there to put water on the fire. You know, if it goes for an hour, well, that's pretty significant impingement, flame impingement, versus a few minutes, and then the fire department gets there and puts some water on it. You know, there's less likely to be significant damage based on the time where the call comes in to when fire apparatus is there trying to put it out.
So what are some of the benefits that you would say to a masonry structure during a fire? So I know in past conversations we had talked about that it's a more predictable material, or kind of you know what to expect. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest part is that you know that is not going to add to your fire load. So where you'll have room and contents burning, you're not necessarily worried about the structure around you catching fire. So that's where like the non-combustible area, but then you can still have combustibles within, whether it's furniture or or whatever. It could be just cooking liquids and stuff like that.
Got you. Can you walk me through an experience that you had where you were called to a fire, a significant fire within a masonry structure?
Sure. I mean, we've had a couple. The two most recent, so I'm in a unique spot where I've not only fought fires within a masonry or wood frame structure, but I've also investigated those fires. So I've had the ability to see both ends, right? You know, see how it is in real time, and then how it is after the fact. Like, oh, look at that! Look how this stops. So the last couple that I remember was an apartment fire. So masonry building, combustible interior elements. So but each apartment had firewalls, which pretty much kept the fire from spreading from one to the next, which was awesome, because the life safety was significant. So, but the initial apartment that burned, it did not spread outside that apartment.
I see.
Commercial-wise, recently we've had a fire where there was a fire in a huge commercial space, but because of the masonry construction and how everything kind of worked out, it did not spread to the wood frame addition that they had put on, which was pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So that limited the fire damage. There was still the problem even with masonry is whether there could be like very little fire damage to the structure, there's still significant smoke and water, right? That you have to worry about. So with that in mind, that stuff's easy to clean. Fire is much harder to replace.
Sure. Yeah. So talking a little bit more about your experience then in investigating after a fire, has occurred. Can you describe typically what you would see then in the aftermath of a fire within a masonry structure versus wood or even metal and glass?
So again, there's variables associated with that, right? So within the City of Schenectady, we're kind of blessed that we are a career fire department. So we live in those firehouses, we sleep there, we eat there, we train there, right? So for those 24 hours, that's our home. So we can get pretty much anywhere in the city within 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Versus a career volunteer department, that might take a little extended period of time. So because they have to come from wherever they are, whether it's work or school or anywhere with the kids, go to the firehouse, pick the truck up, and then go, right? So with a career department, the effects tend to be a little bit less, only because of the time frame of exposure. But traditionally, what I would see, masonry, you might see some soot and stuff on the masonry itself, but it will largely be intact. You will see significant damage to room and contents, or any kind of wood that's associated with. So, like in this building, you've got truss roof behind you, right? While that isn't going to burn necessarily in a fire, it could suffer some structural integrity issues with twisting and stuff. Whereas wood, you'll have mass loss, right? So if the fire is heavy enough, the wood will burn away, and then there is the possibility of a structural collapse, so to speak, where you traditionally don't see that in my experience. in masonry because it's able to withstand fire for much greater periods of time. That isn't to say that in the past that hasn't occurred where there have been structural collapses with masonry simply because of what the room, what the contents were and how long the fire burned.
Absolutely. So besides the physical building material itself, so say for homeowners, it's not necessarily that they have to purchase a brick home over a wood home. There are other ways that people can be aware of fire safety and do things to prevent fires from starting. I know that you've mentioned a lot about room contents. Can you kind of speak more to that point and give some advice for people?
Yeah, so there's a pretty awesome video on YouTube. I think if you just type in contents fire or whatever it is, there's a side-by-side. And they build it out of exactly the same thing. It's like a wood frame with sheetrock, right? So the structural element is identical.
Yeah.
The only difference is the room and contents. So when you say room and contents, you're talking about that specific room. So a bedroom. You expect there to be a couple dressers, right? A little vanity, a bed, maybe a chair, a desk, something like that. So you would expect those things in those rooms. And that's what I mean by contents, like what is in the room, what furniture, what clothes, what stuff. So this particular video, it shows old school stuff, like back when, I was young. And the furniture associated with that, it was made out of wood, right? I remember the couches being like wool and scratchy and uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
But those tend to not burn very easily, right? The drapes were those old crazy looking drapes, right?
Yeah.
So there's that and on the left. And on the right, it's probably what most of us have in our house now, right? The fancy looking, more modern things, right? Polyester and plasticky and, the fiber, I love some of the stuff from IKEA, but some of that stuff is, it's not fantastic in terms of fire properties. So they light the fire exactly the same way. You could see the one on the left kind of lights up, no crazy, it hits the drape just a little bit. It's in the trash can in the corner. But the one on the right, it's significant, so the fire grows in intensity it doubles in size every 30 seconds. So that particular side, within just a couple minutes, it is fully involved. When I say fully, it's like wall to wall, floor to ceiling. You just look in and there's fire.
Okay.
And you look at the one on the left and it has put itself out because of the contents of that room.
Wow.
Don't really burn very well. So in terms of more modern times, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at stuff that's made from petroleum, right? The stuff that we're sitting on there's a lot of petroleum in the stuff that we do.
Yep.
Petroleum's oil. Oil likes to burn, right? So a lot of the stuff that we deal with room and contents, they burn much, much faster. And unfortunately, when people have clutter, not only does that aid in the fire spread, but it also makes it harder for you to escape in the event of a fire. It makes it harder for the fire department to enter that building to put the fire out or to effect a rescue should that need to be done. So the people have to be conscious of the contents of their rooms and how they're set up, right? So I don't think everyone thinks egress, like, oh, how am I going to get out of this house?
Sure.
Right? But that should be kind of a thought process, right? You think about like schools and businesses, they get a code violation if their egress is barred, where we don't really pay attention to residential fires, which tend to be the greatest number of fires that a firefighter would respond to.
Wow. So
when you're tripping over things to get out of the house, that isn't the greatest thing. So it is beneficial for people to think, how am I going to get out of the house? And then it's even more beneficial to, what do I do when I get out of the house? Yeah. Is there a place that I go? Have I talked to my kids and to my family about escape plans and where to go and then when to call? Like, you never call from in the house when the fire's burning. You wait till you get outside, till everybody's accounted for. So that when you make that call, you know exactly what to say. This is my address, this is what's burning. Everyone is out of the house.
Yeah.
Because that's huge with a responding fire department, to know that the house is empty versus the house has occupants in it, because that changes tactics significantly.
When we talk about having a plan for families, and I remember, you know, going to elementary school, firefighters coming in and talking to us, and then going home and making that type of plan with our family. When it comes to commercial spaces, I feel that we're more dependent on building codes and safety codes. Can you kind of speak a little bit more about those? And I know you mentioned egresses. Is that egress or egresses?
Or just egress. Yeah.
Just egress. So you talked a little bit about egress. Can you expand a little bit more on building codes and how we can ensure that our commercial and manufacturing spaces are set up for success in the same way that families, you know, are making these plans to get out of the house safely in case of a fire?
So within New York State, we follow both building codes and fire codes. Building is building, fire is keeping people safe. So most commercial structures are pretty good. They're wide open, right? Sometimes the hardest part is just identifying what's my egress, right? So if you have a door with just blank, you have to make sure people understand that that's not how you get out, right? So that's why codes are, you have to have that, the lit exit sign, you know, showing that. There has to be stairwells accessible, right? And most stairwells have to be fire rated for a couple hours to provide, and in the event of an emergency, a safe access point. There can be egress hallways, but they have to lead to stairwells, you know, to get out. So there's a ton of stuff. There's, you know, there's sprinkler codes. There's codes for fire extinguishers, how far apart they have to be, right? There's codes on stairwells, how far someone would have to walk to get there. So probably the easiest part when you're thinking about a commercial structure, whether it's building from scratch or retrofitting an existing space, work with your codes. You know, the code enforcement or the building department within the town that you deal with, town, village, you know, city, they're really kind of up to date. You know, there are some cities where fire departments will do fire inspections and codes will do code inspections. But by and large, you know, code enforcement officers should be able to answer really any questions associated with keeping your occupants safe in the event of an emergency. It doesn't even have to be a fire. It could just be whatever reason that fire alarm goes off. You want to make sure that the occupants, your clients, your family, right, your community, is able to leave wherever they are in that building safely, effectively, quickly, and then then the fire department shows up and takes care of the rest.
So you have definitely, you know, talked a lot about different positives of masonry buildings when it comes to fires, which of course we never want a fire to happen in any type of structure. But it does seem like there are a lot of benefits to either being in a building that's built with masonry, you know, having your business there, whatever the case may be. However, we wouldn't be being fully transparent if we didn't also talk about the downsides of masonry. So are there any, and can you kind of elaborate a little bit on what some of the cons might be as you've experienced?
Firematically speaking, masonry buildings, they're pretty amazing, you know, for their structural integrity and everything they do. There are a couple little things though that can be problematic. Ventilation can be a big problem within masonry. I can cut a hole in the side of a house and either ventilate or escape should that be necessary. That becomes very difficult in the event of a masonry structure because it's much harder to punch a hole through block or brick, right? So ventilation is a big thing. There's also, with houses, their roof line traditionally is wood, right? And wood has excellent structural properties when it's intact. It also has pretty good structural properties even if fire has impinged on it. Whereas a commercial property sometimes will have bowstring truss or truss roofs, right? Where it's metal. And while that has the ability to withstand a significant amount of fire and heat, there is a breaking point to which it won't necessarily suffer mass loss, but as we talked about before, it could twist or bend as a result of the heat, and that does make roof lines. And if you think about a building, every element of a building is dependent on another element for structural integrity, right? So the walls themselves, they're fantastic, but they're very floppy at the top, and that's where the roof comes in, holding everything together. So if you do suffer some kind of roof integrity loss, it does unfortunately make the structural integrity of the walls around it, or under it, I should say, a little less skeptical. Like it's something that we think about, right? So in firefighting, we're always kind of planning for a collapse. So there's a collapse zone that we kind of pay attention to with, hey, we shouldn't be within this area, just God forbid something falls. And so that is something that we pay attention to firematically with masonry structures.
Okay, so this has been very informative, and there's a few things that I want to try to summarize or just kind of wrap up for our viewers as little bite-sized takeaways here. So for fire safety, some of the things that people should be most concerned about is definitely managing clutter, being aware of the materials that they have, things around their home, having a plan to get out, making sure that you have fire extinguishers. And then on the commercial side, we have sprinkler systems, fire extinguishers, safety plans in place. Are there any things that we haven't talked about that you feel that the general public or anyone who might be listening, people who are designing these buildings, what are some things that they should really keep in mind?
Everything we've talked about has been important, right? Paying attention to the structural elements of the building that you're in, that you live in, that you work in. Always pay attention. If you're going to a new place, look at the exits, right? People tend to leave from where they came in. But as we experienced earlier today on the Thruway and the Northway, everyone going to one place isn't always the right, may not be the best.
Yeah.
So just kind of pay attention. Think about, all right, if something happens, everyone's gonna go out this one, right? They're gonna go out the front door. I see a side door, I'm gonna go out that, right? Think about different ways to get out in the event of an emergency. Think about how you live, how you work, where you have clutter. Like I know people bring those little portable heaters to work because it's cold. They can't control the heat. Like those aren't necessarily safe if they're plugged into a big power strip. Those need to be plugged right into a wall, right? They have to have the tip. So when it tips over, there's a switch underneath, right? So that it turns the element off. If it doesn't turn the element off, they're probably on a rug, right? Which could be problematic.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I don't know if we talked about it, smoke detectors, right? Smoke detectors are just an amazing, amazing tool at keeping people safe, whether it's in a commercial building, whether it's in a commercial masonry building, residential wood, it doesn't really matter. That gives you a little bit of time. Remember, we talked about fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. So when you have the ability to have smoke detectors in place and get that warning at the beginning of a fire versus the middle or way into it, the outcomes tend to be a lot better. So we just did, and if I can plug this for 1 second, there's fire departments throughout the area that work with the Red Cross in a sound the alarm event. We just did one over the weekend, and they have wild success in determining houses that don't have smoke detectors or that don't have enough smoke detectors and putting them where they're supposed to be, right? So for the viewers, I would wager a guess that there's very few people that have the requisite number of smoke detectors in their houses or their buildings for that matter. So code is you have to have a smoke detector in every bedroom.
Okay.
Not just one, every bedroom. You have to have a smoke detector in the hallway that leads to those bedrooms.
Okay.
You have to have a smoke detector in any room someone may fall asleep. So like a living room or a family room, right, with a big couch. Bathroom in my house, I'd probably fall asleep there. And then at least one on every floor,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even if it's just an attic that you store stuff in, you should have a smoke detector up there. There's wiring up there. Sometimes there's furnaces up there.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to protect yourself. And then the last place would be an attached garage. You have to have one in the attached garage.
Okay.
They should be mounted high as you can reach on the wall or on the ceiling, because when the fire happens, where does the smoke go?
Raises up.
Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So they should be mounted as high as you can. They make them now with 10-year sealed, so you don't even have to worry about checking the battery every 6 months. You just put it up, and 10 years, give or take,
Mm-hmm.
just replace it, right?
Gotcha.
Carbon monoxide,
Mhm.
those should be on every floor where there's a fuel burning appliance. So most of us should have it in the basement.
Okay.
If you have a gas furnace, you should have it on the first floor, right? And those can be mounted wherever. Carbon monoxide readily mixes with air, so it doesn't really matter if you have it on the floor or if you have it on the ceiling. It
Okay.
will detect it.
Mm-hmm.
They make plug-in smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. Perfect, as long as they have a battery backup. Because in the event of a power failure, you don't want the one thing protecting you
Yes.
to not work.
Yeah.
So as long as there's a battery backup, you can plug them in.
I think that's fantastic advice. I've definitely learned a lot in terms of fire safety, and there's some things I'm going to be implementing and changing.
Yeah, have a plan.
Mhm.
Make sure your house is safe. Go over it with the family members. This is where we're going to meet. This is where we're going to call.
Mhm.
If one of us doesn't make it there, this is what you tell the fire department, or the responders, whether it's the police that get there first.
Yep.
Just have a plan, whether it's masonry, whether it's wood frame.
Yep.
Have a plan to get out. Have a plan once you get out, and make sure your stuff is safe, because we hope we never go to a fire, right?
Absolutely. David, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This has been a fantastic conversation, and I am excited for viewers to also get the perspective from Ken as well, who he's going to be the second part of this episode. So again, thank you so much. And if you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and make sure to check in next time because we will have more episodes talking about other topics like this.